Welcome back, everybody, to Salty Runback's coverage of the Collegiate Championship Series, round of 16. And what a start here. Well, just a game in general, Quacks. A very back-and-forth affair here. But the Western Mustangs, they came out on top. And who are some players that you really want to highlight to watch out for in game number 2 if you're Northwood, and just a shout-out if you're a Mustangs fan?
I mean, you got to shout out Mira, right? I mean, what a performance on the what a performance on the Aurelian Soul, right? I mean, it really was a quiet pick in the early game and then exploded in the late game, had so many key ultimates and just was so good at dancing around the fight. You could specifically see RBM trying really hard in a couple of those fights to try and kill off that Aurelian Soul, but every time that Acel managed to fly away, navigate around like a Delta airline almost, the entirety of Northwood. So I really think in game number 2, even if we don't see the Acel again, we are certainly going to see a lot of action from RBM because the other lanes are a little bit foggy, right? We have lane swaps. We've established that in game number 1. But the one lane that doesn't lane swap is going to be mid lane. And for that reason, again, I think Mira definitely going to be the player I'm looking out for as the new guy and the one that was super consistent in game number 1.
Yeah, we'll see what the response looks like from Reppy, who I know has some Yon games under their belt, but curious to see if we'll see Reppy get an Ari game. I feel like that's one of his best played champions. We're not going to mention the OTP. You know, we won't mention that champion because we're talking about the real champ pool of Reppy. Also want to give credit to Dr. Calculus. I'm really curious to see how this top lane matchup kind of evolves because when you talk about Dr. Calculus's champ pool, Cassante is his real only like tank champion that he really brings to the table here. He was a really great facilitator in the next game. And I'm curious to see when Western will decide to shift him over to more of a carry role so he can bring out his Aatrox that he loves to go for. He loves to bring Yone top sometimes, those flashier picks.
For sure. I think Dr. Calculus was certainly out of his element in game number 1, but I feel like that is almost what is required of you to play in the lane swap meta that we have here, right? You don't want to be playing, these carry top laners that are going to inevitably be in a 1v2 matchup because that's not how you get the ball rolling, right? That's not a champion you're going to be able to snowball no matter how good Calculus is at them. He's one man, and it's most likely that you're going to be playing against 2 in your laning phase. So you definitely don't want to chance that there's going to be a lane swap by putting your top laner in such a carry role. I feel like that's why champions like Urgot are so good. Skarner is still really good if you want like a little bit more carry. I feel like people are underestimating just how much of a carry Skarner can be. So I feel like there is a way for them to find a happy medium for Dr. Calculus, and I'm curious to see if we'll see that in game 2.
I'm also curious, when it comes to the lane swaps, what it looks like for these the 80 carry philosophy as well, right? Because you kind of saw both sides of the coin in game number 1. If you can lane swap into a more passive lane, it feels like that might be better for a scaling 80 carry. A lot of those are really prevalent. We saw enthralled on that Jinx last game with the Varus band away. Then there's the other side of the coin, Quacks, where it's if you pick the early game 80 carry, like Lynx's Callista, you feel a lot more power in your lane swap, almost the fact that you can go for those dives. We saw Iso die twice, level 1 and level 3, because of the power of that early level Callista Alistar, along with some help from the jungler.
Yeah, that was bullying, I feel. So there are a lot of options, though, for the 80 carries. I feel like Lynx is definitely a player, especially when we saw him on Aporia in Blue Water League. You would kind of see him more on a weak side role, right? He would usually be the one playing things like the Ashe, things like poke lanes that can make way for his jungler and his mid laner to get a lot of the pressure instead. And he would sort of be the backbone for the team. But I like what we're seeing from Western. I like that Lynx is able to flex his experience because he has been able to pull out things like the Callista that we saw in game 1. Be that aggressive champion, be that aggressive player that we want to see. So a lot of flexibility from this bot lane in particular. And I'm thinking if they want to switch anything up, Lynx and Loyal are more than happy to do so.
Yeah, certainly are. And I'm curious if we will potentially see Enthralled and Clyde maybe try to venture towards more early game-oriented champions. I know Enthralled's most played is on that Varus, which you can obviously flex into a multitude of sort of build paths to fit what style you want to play. But, Enthralled had a pretty good early game, and we're going to go back to the point we've been making, Quacks, this entire time, right, is that Enthralled was the one brought into Northwood to perform, had a great early game, but kind of felt like it was just too rough to play any AD carry later in the game up against that A-Soul. Positioning
Yeah.
was a little bit off. If you're enthralled here, what do you look to do in game 2 to kind of establish yourself, reestablish yourself, ground yourself, and play the enthralled that people have hyped this guy up to be on Northwood?
I mean, Enthralled is kind of in the boat of a lot of AD carries that have made themselves known in the past, year, I would say, where they're incredibly mechanically raw. And we saw that in the lane phase. But once it gets to that mid to late game, sometimes they'll get caught out. Sometimes they'll get picked off. And we saw that a couple of times where Enthralled seemed to be separated from the rest of his team. So I think you just need to pick a champion that can really index into Enthralled's strengths as a mechanical player. I'm thinking things like the Lulu enchanters that can really help him out, beef him up, speed him up potentially. I'm thinking Lulu can work, Nami can work. You can maybe go for something. I guess you could go for something more like Renata if you wanted to, if you wanted a little bit more lane power. But I do feel like you need to play into Enthralled's strengths in mechanics and have someone sit on him if you really want him to traverse the mid to late game team fights that we saw him have difficulty with in game 1.
Be very interesting to see. I don't know if we do have word what the side selection looks like for Northwood. Obviously on the loss here. Okay, I'm hearing for production. Same side. So they'll stick to that blue side. I'm curious where they'll go with this B1, because there are still a lot of great picks that you could go really in any lane. I'm specifically curious where maybe a guy like RBM wants to land, because Karthus is a very specific type of jungler that you can bring into competitive. Not really indicative too much of what I feel like RBM's champ pool looks like as a whole. Do we see maybe a tank swap to give more power to a mid lane pick, an AD carry pick? I'm curious what you think, especially with the fact that ISO is usually just locked in as that tank at the top 9 times out of 10.
I mean, Aizo has been known as the tank man, but I feel like he's kind of shed that light a little bit in this series, right? We talk about the Urgot that he had against Converse. He's capable of playing much more than tanks. He has a wide champion pool, like you mentioned, Slayer. So there's a lot of possibilities for that player in particular. RBM, though, is definitely one of the better players, in my mind at least, on his respective squad. I feel like RBM has a decent amount of mechanics. He has a lot of experience too. So you can put this guy on just about anything, I feel, and make it work. And we saw that in Game 1's draft, where we saw things like the Lee Sin ban, right? So paying respects to the fact that RBM can play those carry champions, but he can also play those tanks. So I'm right there with you, Slayer. I really have no idea what they're going to put RBM on because he can do just about anything. So it'll be interesting to see for sure.
Really interesting to see where we are. I believe we're still waiting on the draft here for hopefully not too much longer. We're getting pretty close here at a draft, but Quacks, it's worth talking about here. Northwood, you can say what you want to say about this school. I know a lot of people have called them overrated, not really playing up to talent, but they do know how to play. They've played a lot of long-winded series. Obviously, in that third-place match of the North Conference, they went the distance up against ISU to get that win. So I'm curious how prepared they are to go the distance in these best-of-5s, because we talk about Western, really outside of their conference title game, the level of competition might be a bit lower for them coming into this tournament compared to a Northwood.
For sure. And as we drop into the draft here, really interested to see what the bans are going to be, if we're going to see any repeat bans or what the adaptations are going to look like for both teams. I think if you are Northwood, you're still just wanting to, minimize Mira and Lynx, right? You're wanting to minimize those big carry ADCs and those big carry mid laners. Yeah, we can see the Aurelion Soul immediately taken off the table, followed by that Talia. I think maybe we'll see something like the Ahri. That's possible. Maybe the Hui. I'm not sure if Mira is super skilled on that champion in particular, but these enchanters that we've seen from Mira before, I would expect to be taken off.
Well, it looks like right now for Northwood, they just want to see some different carry champions in this game number 2, right? It's hard in this format to really pinch these players' pools, but Lynx will have to go towards another AD carry, like you mentioned, Mira, a potential different mid lane pickup here. I'm curious if Western not willing to throw a ban towards Ahri. I don't hate that as a B1 currently where Ahri is right now. They'll instead get Enthralled's Jinx off instead of the Varus. So some pretty comfort-oriented champions are definitely, at least in the carry aspect, going to be available for Northwood. And there, right on cue, you talk about it. Enthralled's most played AD carry of the collegiate season so far. Varus will be locked in B1.
I like this a lot from Northwood, right? You're indexing into the strengths. You're indexing into the primary picks for your big mechanical carry in Enthralled. And on the other side, we can see it looks like it's going to be Western trying to do the same thing, unlocking bot lane. They're going to pick up the Aphelios Alistar. And now I have to think we're probably going to pick the support jungle here. Kindred is going to potentially be the answer here for really big meme. So double marksman means we'll probably see an enchanter. I think Lulu is really good here. I think if you want to play around really big meme a little bit more, you could draft something like Janna as well to be able to leave the lane. But then that leaves Enthralled open to potentially getting Dove, and you don't want to get Dove with this comp that has an Alistar. It definitely puts emphasis on you needing to stay around the lane to protect this Varus. So an enchanter, I think, is a likely, but we'll have to wait and see as the timer continues to run out.
Looks like Galio the lock-in. So I guess you could, if you really want to get crazy, you could slot that into the support. Maybe a little bit of flexibility. I'm assuming that's going to be Reppy on the Galio nonetheless, but interesting to see that Western, they don't get their carries on the same champions. They're going to have their facilitators playing similar roles once more. Krakenon back on Xin Zhao, and then you've got Loyal on the Alistair, both repeating that game. And if you want to talk about most played champions in collegiate season so far, as we look at those second wave of bans, I want to quickly point out that Lynx's most played so far is also, in his career, Aphelios. So, ultimate comfort between these two marksmen.
For sure, comfort v comfort, and Lynx, I feel, you know, you have to talk about this storied guy, right? He has been around the scene for so long, and so when you want to talk experience, I feel like Lynx is the premier AD carry to do so, at least in regards to the tier 3 scene. So I'm looking for some really spicy Aphelios gameplay here in game number 2 from him, because this is his most played champion, this is his most experienced champion, and he is a hell of an experienced player. As Western going to actually go for the top lane here. They're going to pick up the Cassante, and Enthralled actually going to, or no, sorry, the Tom Kench actually going to be locked in here for Clyde. And we have a Maokai. Izo is the grandfather of Maokai, so I think this is an Izo special coming out here for game number 2.
I love this answer, though, potentially in the jungle, or actually, ooh, this could get real dicey. I think this might be into the Galio. I think Mira wants the Cassante, and then Dr. Calculus wants the counter into the Maokai with the Gwen top, potentially. A lot of fun, especially with lane swaps involved. But, Quacks, let's get right to the Rift so we can start breaking this down. We can see exactly champions are going. Game number 2, big spot here if you are Northwood trying to claw back in the series, or can Western get to that pivotal 2-0 point? It's all to be decided on the Rift here. As we can see, Dr. Calculus does go for the Gwen, and they're going to swap that Cassante into Mira up against this Galio. What a different mid lane matchup we've got, Quacks.
For sure. Pocket picks all around here for Kindred and for Maokai. Northwood, I would imagine it's really going to be interesting to see how really Big Meme plays in this game, because we talked about it, right? This is a player that can play just about anything. But Kindred, as he flexes his Mastery 7 symbol, he loves this champion. And he's flexing the new skin. He's sporting the new prestigious skin. God, I love that. I don't have it, though. So it'll be interesting to see how Clyde and Reppy really hammer home with this Kindred, try and put pressure on Krakenon. But on the other hand, you want to make sure this Varus is as juiced up as possible going into the mid to late game.
Looks like his lethal tempo on hit, likely Varus scaling up one like you mentioned. And there's just comfort picks galore coming out here. Izo on the Maokai, RBM's Kindred, comfort. Enthralled loves the Varus. On the other side, you've got Lynx on his patented Aphelios. Krakenon loves Xin Zhao. Interesting to note, though, we talked about Dr. Calculus, loves those carry champions, only has one collegiate game on the Gwen top, so not too much comfort there, at least on the biggest of stages.
You know, usually you would see someone use an axe to cut down a tree, but scissors will do. That's exactly what Gwen likes to do as well, right? Gwen is the premier tank killer in the top lane. Get 2 to 3 items, and just, there's no difference between a squishy champion and a tank for her at that point in the game. So Dr. Calculus certainly going to be the one I'm looking at to be that late game threat here. And it's just going to be up to them to try and protect it. They don't necessarily have to index into trying to snowball it, but just making sure that it isn't super far behind and then it can get to that 2 to 3 item spike at a healthy point in the game is objective number 1. Goal number 1.
Certainly a goal that champion like Aphelios is also looking to get to with Lynx here. Don't have the push early on in this game, and the range of that lashing tongue from Clyde really making things difficult for Lynx. Does have the red form here, so we'll be able to get some lifesteal back. But a lot of early pressure bot side, and when you talk about Kindred, that's the big thing, right? You cannot have success on a comp with a Kindred in it if you do not have pushing lanes. So it's good to see that at least bot side RBM has that going for him.
And you can see RBM actually deciding not to go for the full clear. Instead, the invade. Reppy ghosted. They're maybe looking for a dive here.
Oh, they might just pick off Kraken on good dash to get back under turret, and we might not have lane swaps, but we have Abyssal dives into straight turret dives. They're going for Kraken on teleport channel. They can't pick up the kills in time. Finally, Kraken on falls, but RBM has to flash out super low, and now Mira is here. Chaos under the tier 1 bot side turret, but somehow it ends up just a split here between Northwood and Western.
Chaos indeed, Slayer, but at the same time, RBM managing to pick up a kill, managing to get his mark as well on to Krakedon. So the Kindred opening up with a really nice game here, managing to pick those two things up. And as we pan to the top side, it is just Dr. Calculus pushing in the wave against Izo. Izo, a lot of experience on this champion like we talked about in draft, right, Slayer? So knows the limits of the Maokai. Definitely doesn't want to take extended trades against the Gwen, but can certainly try and, you know, fish around, get some poke down, maybe some setup if RBM decides to go over there. And speaking of that, they're maybe looking for something in the mid lane.
No taunt, no party for Northwood there. So Mira able to escape here. Izo, how much pressure can he grab and survive? That's the question, because Krakedon and Dr. Calculus are looking for the dive here. Has the flash available. Flashes away, but it's too late. Dr. Calculus gets the kill and gets out from under the turret. And the Western Mustangs now have their scaling option somewhat online. He is going to have to execute and give the kill over to Izo, but he'd rather give the kill back over to the tank than give another one over to RBM's Kindred.
For sure. You don't want to keep juicing up this Kindred. It just makes it so much worse because Really Big Meme has not reset yet. Obviously is going for that reset, but probably going to be able to pick up that Noon Quiver, I would imagine, which is a huge spike for this champion and allows RBM to be so much more aggressive as well, as long as the priority is set in stone.
Priority, name of the game with the Kindred. We'll see what the prio looks like here for this first Drake. Nobody really over towards there. A lot of top lane onus, especially from Krakedon, who's really just looking to feed Dr. Calculus. You can tell how much the Mustangs want to get Dr. Calculus' Gwen online. Izo, no summoners up, just trying to buy time, buy a little bit of space. The sapling slow may be somewhat helpful, but Timber goes Izo's Maokai. The tree falls again to the scissor might of Dr. Calculus.
And the wave is absolutely terrible for Izo at this point in the game, right? 2 M1 Gwen has the Haunting guys available. It makes it so difficult for him to walk up because now this is going to be a Gwen that's going to get a ton of CS, a ton of experience, and going to make your lane an absolute living hell without you having that flash up. Will ding the level 6. Meanwhile, on the other side, though, RBM manages to get his second mark of the game. So this Kindred scaling along with the Gwen. So this might very well be a battle of the big scalers for both teams.
Always makes for fun team fights later on. The big fight happening now is RBM going to keep playing towards that bot side this game. We'll grab Northwood, their first Drake of the series here, picking up that Inferno. Krakedon is nearby, but down a level. Not really going to think he's wanting to even try a contest for this one. Uncontested Dragon. And I'll avert everyone's eyes over to those grubs to see where the next real point of emphasis is for both of these teams.
And now Krakedon has kind of a timer set on himself to go for those grubs before RBM inevitably makes his way toward the top side. But if this Kindred does notice this Xin at all, then it could spell really bad news for Krakedon, as neither of his lanes have priority. And yeah, look at the on my way pings. They see him on a ward. Krakedon has flash, though.
Has flash, gets one little grubby. Izo's going to twist it advance, forces the flash out of Krakedon. Taunt still going to land for Reppy. Here's the ultimate. The Nature's Grasp will secure the kill. Izo gets his revenge onto Krakedon, and RBM gets to steal away more camps. Look at the mark positioning to their quacks for RBM.
3 marks acquired for RBM. He's going to just say, I do not care about the grubs yet. I'm going to pick this one up. And man, RBM with an absolute masterclass on this Kindred, getting so many marks so early on and just exerting pressure around the map.
Pressure is what Izo is also all about absorbing. Was a little bit rough earlier, but now really stabilized himself. Certainly helpful that he was able to grab a return kill at the end of things onto Dr. Calculus, trying to farm up and be a bit bulkier of a tree. And also, you can see the ratifications of that last play. Kraken going to watch as the last two grubs go the way of RBM. And if we could potentially look at the gold advantage, I got to think that the main reason Northwood are able to stay close in the gold department is this Kindred.
For sure.
Oh.
I think Kindred definitely has a decent lead in gold. You can see has around 200, but the big... I figured it would be more too, but the big difference in gold is definitely in top lane. Look at Dr. Calculus. We are less than 10 minutes in, and he has a 4K gold lead on this Maokai. So definitely going to be a scary Gwen as this game continues to go later. And they're looking to make it even worse as Kraken is waiting in the wings to continue feeding this Gwen.
Okay, Izo still no flash. Really low, should be as good as dead. Trying to run away with the phase rush, does buy some distance. Here's RBM on the turn, but just showing a bit of force here, making sure his top laner doesn't fall. And yeah, you talk about that Gwen hitting hard early. There you go.
Yeah, that true damage proc managed to land onto RBM, and that dissuades him enough to leave the area. He does not want to mess with Dr. Calculus, who still has the needlework, so not a fight you want to take if you're Northwest, or if you're Northwood here, because you would lose. It's plain and simple.
A lot more passive in early game without the lane swaps, and we do still have a gold lead for Western here. He talked about Dr. Calculus. I do want to say, Enthrall doing a pretty good job starting to build up a bit of a CS lead himself, bot side. Sitting at about 20. I think with that wave crashing, it will be about a wave and a half's worth. And that's really, in those scale of your scale matchups early game, what you got to look for is which AD carry can come out with the least amount of deaths, I would argue, more than kills, and with a better creep score.
For sure, but even though Lynx is down in CS department, he still has the advantage of getting that kill early on. So the gold about equalized in those lanes, but it is worth noting that Lynx has the red and white gun, so definitely don't want to fight Aphelios when he has those guns. It definitely is a matter of timing, I would say, for Northwood if they want to look for any picks onto Lynx in the bot side. Because if he has those big guns, if he has the ability to potentially turn the fight, then you are going to get what you asked for and then some with this Aphelios. Definitely don't want to underestimate that pick, and definitely don't want to underestimate Lynx himself.
No, certainly not. And knowing Lynx, and if you'd watched game one, I don't need to tell anybody at home twice here. Interesting to see the shift in mid lane, right? We went from damage v damage to utility now. Looks like the Shirelia's crown completed there for Reppy for the extra speed boost, and I'm really looking for Reppy in this part of the game in particular to try to assert his dominance. He does have, more of a map pressure on this Galio compared to the Cassante. Wow, okay. Moonlight Vigil goes down from Lynx. Bit of an old stat check. Clyde, though, is going to get bumped back near towards the turret. That is the Chains Corruptions drop through for Enthrall. It's both AD carry ultimates down. Loyal, without the Unbreakable Will, having to flash away from that exchange.
And look at RBM. He's waiting in the wings. He's waiting in the bush. They have the Lamb's Respite available. Lynx does have both sums, though, so this could be a difficult tower dive to operate.
Clyde has ultimate, has the Devour. Loyal's to level 5. There's a good root. RBM going right onto Lynx, just burning him down. Clyde grabs aggro so well with a Turkinet turn, and there's the Lamb's Respite. So well played by RBM.
God.
And a great Devour from Clyde. The only reason Northwood is able to stay on top of that dive.
Northwood, beautiful usage of the ultimates to keep the carries alive. And Kraken has made his way to the bot side, but all he can do is watch. But the health bars are pretty low, so it doesn't look like they're going to be able to pick up the dragon despite their success of a dive, but beautifully played by Northwood.
Yeah, I mean, that is a trade. If those are not the champions on the dive, those ultimates are not available. Devour and Lamb's Respite. Really well played, and now RBM already up to that first item himself. I love this play as well. Quacks for itemization if you're RBM. Kraken Slayer, a big pickup in a game up against a Cassante mid and an Alistar that you're going to have to burn through.
Kraken Slayer is the premier go-to, right? A lot of people can argue that Blade of the Ruined King might be good as well, but I feel like in a game like this where you are against basically 4 tanks on Western, you definitely want to get Kraken Slayer, right? So definitely the preferred itemization for Kindred, and it's good against the compies they're going against, right? And we might see that in action here as Krakenon might spot out RBM taking these grubs, but yeah, he doesn't want the smoke. Izo is with the Kindred, so no fight to be had, no stop to be had, and that's going to be 5 grubs for Northwood.
Oh, Enthralled wants the marksman 1v1, change the corruption down. There's the Moonlight Vigil back. Link's trying to use that Infernum gun, but has to flash out. Enthralled winning that big-time marksman stat check and getting a coveted summoner for it.
Link's still on the map, and
Mira's
Mira's made a flank.
Here we go, has all out, looking to pull Enthralled back towards the rest of the team. Great headbutt from Loyal, and Enthralled does get devoured by Clyde. Can he get out? There's the all out, though. Enthralled pulled back, has to flash away, barely stays alive, and Clyde now able to flash back under the turret with the gray health, but Mira's going to follow with the all out for him. The Tofo strikes just too much.
They managed to get Clyde, but a miracle save from the Alistar. And Thrall doesn't go down, so will live to fight another day. And on the other side of the map, you can see Northwood, Kindred, really big meme, and Reppy. They are the ones that managed to get a couple of plates in the mid lane. With resets coming in from Western, I wonder if this could be Northwood's opportunity to siege control of this bot side river, establish vision in preparation for this next dragon.
They're going to catch Lynx on a reset here. And they know Loyal is trying to back off as well. This looks like a free timer for that dragon, so the gold lead's still slightly in Western's favor with the plates they've been able to accrue, but we talk about those neutral objectives. RBM doing a fantastic job prioritizing them in this early game. Up to 5 on the mark counter as well. Make it 6 for this
marks.
Kindred.
6 marks before 20 minutes is any Kindred's dream. So RBM is quite literally living the dream. 2-0-1, has the Kraken Slayer acquired, 6 marks. Very much set up to carry this game, and it's going to be up to Western to really put a stop to it.
Ooh. But like we've seen all early game, Krakenon wants to prioritize this top side. But how costly is it going to become as this game goes on? Sure, those gangs to Izo 2v1 are nice early. There's not much punish. But as it goes on, every time Krakenon pays a visit to Izo, it's going to cost them more. And this time, it's going to be that second Drake going over to RBM and Northwood.
And we can see plays on the opposite sides of the map. Mira!
Mira, your turret's gone, my friend! And now he finds 3 members waiting for him under the broken ruin. His double form only going to delay the inevitable. Another mark, 7 stacks on RBM's Kindred at 15 minutes.
And now the mid lane is potentially under siege as Western dropped the Herald. All the members of Northwood were committed to the side lanes. It's just Enthrall, but he can only watch. Izo, you could say he could look for a TP, but he was completely pushed in there by Dr. Calculus. But they're looking for a fight despite this.
Lynx avoids the first knock-up. Great set of taunts as well. The Nature's Grasp going to grab Lynx, but he's far enough back here. He's able to stay safe. And while he's free-firing, Western got a chance, but the Chains of Corruption is going to snipe him. RBM finds a double. This Kindred exacerbating the lead here for Northwood. RBM can't let this series go down 0-2.
RBM, he is the definition of beware of an old man in a profession where young people usually die, or where people usually die young, I believe is the saying. As RBM, he's been a veteran for so long, but despite that, on his pocket pick Kindred, he is making Western bleed here in game number 2.
5-0. Curious if we can get a look at the gold one more time because he still only has the Kraken Slayer and the steel caps. Yeah, sitting on 3,000 gold. That's basically a full item back going to come through here once he clears down all of his camps. We'll take the reset now. But my God, do the Timberwolves have a very clear lifeline, in this game number 2. But don't want to sing short early games from Enthralled here. I mean, going 1-0-4 on this on-hit Varus early game, coming out of the lane with a CS lead. That 2 marksman late game picture looking real clear here for the Timberwolves.
For sure. And, you know, you look at Western and potential avenues for them to scale into the late game. And just like the gold lead we saw between the junglers, that is the same split for the top laners, right? Dr. Calculus still has a commanding gold lead here in this game, is going to actually bust down this turret. And, you know, just closer and closer to getting that 2 to 3 item spike that Gwen wants to go for. So certainly Western have an avenue for them to go into the late game too, right? Along with Northwood's Kindred and Varus, Western have the Gwen.
This is the style that both teams are kind of mirroring each other with here. A lot of outside turrets being taken. No Rift Herald, no Dragon means what do these fights look like? What team wants to push the tempo? It looks like it's going to be Northwood. They're channeling onto Loyal. You could just see how much RBM shreds through the front line for the Mustangs. Loyal had no chance in the world.
Didn't even want to flash. He knew he was dead. He knew he was caught out. And speaking of getting caught out, it might be Mira next.
Yeah, the train tracks rolling down to the bot side here for Northwood. 1 versus 4 here. Can Dr. Calculus at least come away with one? Izo's going to say no. Great slam on the ground to get RBM godlike as these picks are just rolling for the number 6 seed.
For sure, the number 6 seed coming up big. And it's just Lynx trying to get anything he can back. Lynx hasn't really been able to make a splash in this game. He's only sitting on 1 item, so hasn't really hit the spike that you want for Aphelios yet. But yeah, I mean, poor Wolves, man. Just take down one of the children and leave the others. What is wrong with you, Lynx? Come on, man.
I love how we go from that heartbreaking story to Dr. Calculus' Gwen just hitting all the disco moves. Not a care in the world. That's how the top lane has been for Dr. Calculus. But, you know, you talk about the gold lead for Dr. Calculus. I'm starting to worry how much it's going to matter because it's kind of put up and shut up time with the lead Dr. Calculus has gotten on this Gwen, especially approaching that Nashor's 2 second item pretty soon here.
And it feels like Dr. Calculus, you know, I agree with that. Dr. Calculus hasn't really been able to enter a lot of these fights. It's just kind of been in side lanes like we see right now, farming up, scaling up. I feel like it's just going to come down to one Dragon fight or potentially Baron fight that's going to decide if this Gwen is really able to surprise the squad of Northwood and burst down their carries. And, you know, I think one fight is all it takes. If the Gwen does burst down those carries, then I think Western have a good chance. If it doesn't, then I think Northwood have a very clear path to victory.
Look who they picked, though. RBM has to flash out. Great Heroes entrance here. Rep be able to taunt up a ton, and RBM stays safe. Enthralled. Start a free fire on the Varus as well. The turn looks masterful for the Timberwolves. The front line, the target, and they're making it look easy. Mira gonna force a 1v1 against Izo, but they already lose Krakodon. The all-out Tofo strike's not gonna do enough. A piercing arrow through the heart through it for Enthralled. Great turn, great composure in this game number 2 from the Timberwolves.
And 3 down from the Western Mustangs, and that is going to be an immediate pivot to the Baron for Northwood as it spawns at 20 minutes. Poor Baron, he spawns in just to die.
Looking like Gen G here, jumping on. How early they like to jump on Barons, how much success they have grabbing those early ones. And hey, wouldn't you know, Northwood are going to grab game 2's Gen G Baron buff here.
Baron buff acquired, and now the Dragon is up, but the members of Northwood have reset, so Western going to be able to establish vision around this pit. But I wonder if it's going to matter if Northwood want this Dragon. If they rush toward it quick enough, they could just pick it off, but it looks like they're making their way toward the top side of the map. Instead, they're saying, you can have that Dragon. We are going to use our Baron buff on these lanes and get everything that comes with it. So definitely a worth it trade for Northwood if they can utilize that pressure correctly.
Yeah, sorry, Cloud Soul enjoyers. I wonder if that's the reason why they're not so active trying to pick up these Cloud Drakes here. And like you mentioned, tier 1 turrets up in the top and mid lane.
Mira.
Boy, does Enthralled start to hurt like a truck. Mira already under half HP. Doesn't have the all-out available. Great Chains of Corruption. Root Reppy coming over. It's just all of Northwood up top here going for Mira. And now got no turret to save themselves once more. Easy kill picked up. The siege rolls on for Northwood in the top side.
And we're seeing the difference in experience here for a player like Mira, right? Looked really solid in game 1, but game 2 has been like completely shut out, right? Managed to get a kill early on, but ever since then, Northwood have descended on them like their logo would suggest, like Timberwolves, and just completely surrounded this Cassante, never giving Mira an opportunity to even fight back in skirmishes or team fights.
When we talk about Izo's pressure sucking, he grabbed, what, 2 people bot side, stopped that push, and what does it get Northwood? An inhibitor in the top side, as nobody could really answer them without the entire might of the Mustangs. And that's so massive to get that topside turret, especially if you want to play for Cloud Soul now. The Mustangs have to worry about that pushing lane constantly on the other side of the map.
And Doomsday has just dropped for Western as Really Big Meme has picked up his third item of the game, Terminus acquired, making it so much more difficult to kill this Kindred, which was already hard given the fact that RBM has not died yet. He's 9-0. So if it was hard before, it's borderline impossible now, I would say.
11th stack, by the way, picked up for this Kindred on that Cloud Dragon. We're at the point where those marks go towards those epic monsters. I think we can categorize RBM now as more than an epic monster in this game number 2.
For sure. He is certainly rolling over the squad of Western. And now Northwood, they still have the Baron buff active, the Genji Baron buff active. And it'll be interesting to see where RBM actually places in all of this. And you can see, actually, the entire squad of Northwood are just going up toward this bot side, not really going to leave anyone in the mid lane. I wonder if this is something that Western can try to stop. You can see Dr. Calculus is actually top lane, just trying to scale up more. But Northwood might not be so patient as to wait for the Gwen. They could potentially look to start something here.
Genji Baron buff does come off. So that does mean that the siege is a lot more difficult. They will still roll in a pack, just like Timberwolves will, towards this bot side. And I like it. There's nothing to play for top side with that inhibitor open, and you feel like you always have a 4v5, like you mentioned, because Dr. Calculus has to answer those supers on the other side of the map. We've got a regular wave pushed up, Void Might's going, Enthralled getting to free hit this turret. When do the Mustangs decide to bail out or fight? It looks like they're going for the first option. They'll give up another inhibitor, this time bot side, 2 side lanes pushing in favor of the Northwood Timberwolves for the next couple of minutes.
And it feels like Western are constantly being backed into a corner. And what do you do when you're backed into a corner? You fight, you bite, you try to get anything you can. So eventually it feels like Western are going to be forced to go on an engage, forced to start a fight. But Northwood, they're so much further ahead. They have 3 dragons in their pocket, 6k gold lead, a 9-0 3-item Kindred, and 3-0 now, and 3-item 3-0 Varus as well. Western, I really don't see how they win this fight at this point. It just feels like the Gwen is not enough.
And you think about it, right, with the Gwen, maybe in a fight, a really good flank from Dr. Calculus. You can get onto either of those carries and blow them up. Here's the problem. We already saw it on that dive earlier in the game, right? Even if RBM gets a little bit caught on a flank, even if Enthralled gets picked off early by Dr. Calculus, you've got Clyde to devour Enthralled, or you've got Lamb's Respite to bail out not only RBM, but arguably the entire team of Northwood. So it's so difficult to pick them. But it looks like the Timberwolves are going for the pick here, or at least maybe a bit of a Nature's Grasp just to get them off the turret. Clyde, though, does take turn aggro, has to flash away from the Might of Lynx, but Krakenon's health bar just eviscerates, has to use the Crescent Guard. Here comes the Dr. Calculus.
Here's the
flank on the rocks here. Devour already used it. Thralled is safe. They're going on to RBM, but here comes the hero entrance. The Might slams down onto Mira. The front line killed in an instant here for the Western Mustangs. Lynx is next to fall. Dr. Calculus having to rush away from the might of the Timberwolves, who might just trudge down mid lane to even up our best of 5.
It's Dr. Calculus and Krakenon up. They don't have ultimates. They don't really have sums. Krakenon does have flash available, but it's not going to matter at this point. It's just a Northwood marching down as 5 strong.
Dr. Calculus gone. There's Krakenon. Loyal respawns just to watch his base go away in droves. The question was always, how do Northwood respond to a great finish from the Western Mustangs? I think they responded pretty accordingly. We are all tied up, 1 apiece in this best of 5 round of 16 matchup.
Yup, and this was the match that a lot of people predicted to go to 5 games, and I feel like if these first couple of matches have been any indication, 5 games is certainly a possible scenario for you and I, Slayer, and personally, I could not be more happy, I could not be more excited. I think both of these teams in both games have shown a lot of heart and how they like to play the game, right? In game number 2, though, It was RBM. It was the really big meme show. He turned this game into a meme almost with the amount of marks that he got, the amount of people he was able to pick off. This Kindred, I would imagine, is definitely going to have its respects paid in the remainder of this series. Probably going to see that banned away once or twice.
A lot of comfort picks we talked about coming out here, especially for Northwood. And it's safe to say, for what we've seen all season long from the Timberwolves, that game right there is what has gotten them to the number 6 seed in the collegiate championship. But like you mentioned, how do the Mustangs adapt the draft? What of those key 3 comfort champions are we denying from Northwood? We'll figure all that out after another extended break to see what does Game 3 look like. What team can grab the edge in what looks to be a very long series between Northwood and Western?